All right, we're back. Thank you, Philippe, for joining us again on another Corporate Underground, and thank you all our millions of listeners for tuning in. We do, like I said, we have Philippe joining us again, and our topic for today is the 2 biggest mistakes that entrepreneurs make. And I thought let's get straight into it, Philippe, with what's one of those that you identify as one of those biggest mistakes that we, like I say we because I'm in that bucket.
So before I dive into that, maybe I'll give a tiny bit of context. So I've been working with founders and entrepreneurs for probably close to 30 years now. And I mean, my specialty is what people call hardware, which is like physical products or consumer goods. And it seems that game is a bit more difficult than any other game in the entrepreneur world. The failure rate is higher there than in, digital retail or any other ventures. And I was trying to understand why that was the case. Turns out that a lot of entrepreneurs do the same thing and commit the same mistakes over and over again. And that explains the failure rate, and especially in hardware. I'm not sure exactly why. I think that can be explained because people that do hardware have more like a technical mind, I would say, and would tend to ignore the other aspects of the business. So long story short, let's dive right into it. The first big mistake that I've seen is what I call lack of market fit, which means never engaging with your audience as you develop your product. And you see that a lot. You see that with, I would call that the inventor mindset or type. So typically an inventor would say, oh, I have an idea. My idea is fantastic.
Brilliant.
It's brilliant. It's the next thing after sliced bread. It's going to work, fly off the shelf. So I'm just going to focus on developing the product. And because it's hardware, that can take a long time. And what happens is that they're going to develop the product, put all the time and resources into that, to discover at the end that they don't sell, and then they question themselves like, well, what's been happening? And very often, some entrepreneur can develop product that don't have any market, and that's very, very unfortunate. And if I may dive a tiny bit, it could be a tiny bit technical here, but if you dive into that, it's sometimes the concept is gold, but the execution and the idea is really badly done. So you need to make the distinction between the concept and the idea, which is the way you shape this idea to the world. So to give an example, a concept is people need to juice their lemons and they need a juicer. So that's a concept. The idea, you have Philippe Guichard doing the Salif juicer, that looks like a spaceship and everything. It looks fantastic. It's pretty much impossible to juice any lemon with that thing. And if you do, you probably need 2 sponges, a bucket, and so it's a lot of accessories that are needed, a bit like with Apple these days. And another juicer could be just the traditional press, the stainless steel press. You have just 2 handles, you press, and that gives a juice, or you can have an electric juicer. And you can see immediately that the concept being the same, you already have 3 completely different execution, or what I call ideas. So that's what I've been observing. Some entrepreneur would just develop their idea. They would completely ignore the concept. They would just focus on the product and develop that. And that leads to very often, unfortunately, failure, because there's no communication with the marketplace. So the biggest mistake from far, I guess, I call that the lack of market fit. And market fit is who you design your product to. Do you solve a problem for them? And how do you solve the problem for them? Is that making sense in terms of service, price positioning, brand, experience, all that thing?
So it's the old saying of measure twice, cut once. So to go back out to the market and actually find out whether your product would be. And when I speak to most of these people that have this idea, they're so nervous of doing that because they're scared someone's going to take their idea.
Yes.
They're scared they're going to open up Pandora's box and have all this competition if they tell anybody. And I look at it the other way, where if you're actually gleaning the market, working out whether this is actually going to go first. So when you go and talk to somebody about that, Philippe, how do you get around that problem? How do you actually solve that issue or discuss that issue? It wouldn't be solving, but discussing that issue.
So there's, again, a very big difference between the idea you have, which is the execution of your concept, and the problem you're solving. So one way to go about it is not to talk about the product. You just talk about the problem you solve. And that there's no IP in that. So if I tell you, you're in a kitchen, you're like Ronan, you like cooking, or your wife likes cooking, every now and then, would you like to be able to juice a lemon without having to, wash, tons of dishes, or have a device that, takes hours to set up, or so you can talk about the question, and those questions are linked to how you've been solving that thing. And it's super interesting to do that, because you're going to face, if I cut the answers in black and white, it's going to be very, very rough cut, but you have either you're in the business of education, or you're in the business of providing a solution for an existing problem. The business of education is you need to make people understand that they have a problem in the kitchen, and the way they juice lemon is taking them too long, is too big of a problem. They don't understand they have a problem. And it doesn't mean that your solution or you don't have a business. It just means that in terms of marketing sequence, you need to add a layer, which is education.
I think we often hear people say that, like, I've often, because I'm in marketing, often get people that have come to me with this new idea or product. And often I do see that as a brilliant solution to a problem that just doesn't exist, Yes. So by simply what you're saying there is simply see how many people have the problem. Doesn't matter if your solution is brilliant. If only 1 in 100,000 people have that problem, then there's no need for a solution.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of that exercise, is that it helps you measure very quickly if you have a market size or not. And by that, let's say you interact with 100 people in your audience. You have 80 people saying, oh yeah, we have that issue. It doesn't mean that you have 80 clients, by the way. That's something that I really need to highlight here. But the thing is, on those 80, there's probably, let's say, 5-10% that can become a client, depending on what type of product and service you're gonna build. So, but regardless of that, the whole exercise helps you measure your market size.
I would also, it's great advice there, Philippe. I would also say it's not just people stealing their ideas. It's the uncomfortable part about speaking to strangers, about speaking to all those people. It's far easier to spend money at something and throw money at a problem, rather than do the old-fashioned kind of speak to people and get uncomfortable with that. So I think there's I think both those elements. There's one, they're afraid that someone's going to steal their amazing idea, and the world's full of amazing ideas. What it needs is execution and as you said, product market fit. And the second part is that people just, for whatever reason, it's a bit like, you're a speaker, Philippe, right? Going up and speaking on stage is the number one biggest fear people have. It's bigger than them, their life ending, them dying.
Yes.
And this is part of it. To go out to speak to the market means you've got to get uncomfortable with speaking to strangers, or cold calling, or stopping people on the street, whatever that takes to get to that number. So there are the two reasons.
People that don't even think to ask, though, because they're way too close. It might be a tool for a job they do, and it would save them 8 hours a day. But the problem is, are they doing a certain way of work that no one else does? They may be an electrician, but how they do their workflow may be different to every other electrician.
But there is one other component to that, Ronan, that we step through. I think you guys have nutted out, but there's a third component where I believe in this so much. I need this to work. I've put my heart and my soul. I've put all my time in this. If I find out that it doesn't work, I'd rather not. I'd rather go. And then if somebody even tells me it's not right, I'm not going to listen to them, because I need to get this done. This is my passion. This is my life. And you go down to a path where they've just gone too far. There's some cost.
The goal is at the start. And something you mentioned, Philippe, that this is obviously a big risk, right? And you work in product area, like physical products. So I guess that is in particular brutal. Like, we always see people like I see, like if I'm a software dev and I come up with some piece of software, it's only my own time. Where if you're in a product and you get to the stage that you have a prototype, you've invested your house. Like, so you see it all the time. They've put their mortgage, their house on an idea, and that's the brutal bit.
So in order to address that, there are probably just two comments maybe I could make. The inventor type, which is someone that has an idea and wants to push that into the world. One of the biggest thing that would happen to them is the emotional attachment to the idea. And it takes conversations so that they can have a bit of distance and breathing space so that they can talk about the idea and receive some kind of feedback and everything. And not every founders, entrepreneur, or inventors is able to do that. Some just can't. The other comment that I had is build it and it will come. I have to say that breaks my heart. Like I met an entrepreneur last year who invested over $2 million in his venture. I think he mortgaged 2 houses and everything. I don't know all the details, but it's a lot of money. And for a fraction of that cost, we could have done the market fit.
It's heartbreaking. I watch Dragon's Den and stuff like that, and you watch all these people come on with the same story, and it's brutal.
But the thing is, his concept is good. Like, his concept is really good. The execution, he went all the way on the left, so to speak, and he got carried away because he thought that was the best solution. Long story short, he's trying to build a whole product, and the concept is actually an accessory to existing lines of products. In terms of strategy, it's not that it's not possible, but it's like, I'm going to build a new car because I have this one idea that will make that car special, or I build an accessory to all the cars that's going to benefit from that idea. In terms of strategy, you see very, very quickly where you need to go. And that's what breaks my heart. Like, this emotional attachment they have, this inability to receive feedback and everything, it costs them money. But as I was mentioning about Australia and risk and ventures here, it costs the country money. Like, that company could be, I'd say, because the market is global, there could be $1 billion company in Australia selling an accessory in the market.
It's a smart person doing something dumb. If we reassign that smart person to doing something smart, they get to somewhere that they're actually making money and exporting it. I'm just conscious of time, Philippe, so maybe we should move on to the next big mistake that I've done. I mean, that someone else has done.
Well, the second mistake is some entrepreneurs are really good at developing an idea, and they're also able to engage somehow with the audience. Yet, I have found that very few look at the numbers. And what I mean by numbers is you don't need to build a whole 90-page business model. You can have a 1-page business model with an overview. But what strikes me is the belief that your product is good enough, is going to fly off the shelves, and the only cost you have is pretty much the manufacturing cost. You put a bit of margin so that you're comfortable, and you have your wholesale or retail price, whatever the case may be. I'll give you just one example, and we can talk about that and wrap the discussion here. But one cost that is often ignored or at best underestimated is the cost of acquisition to customer. And typically, if you talk about a founder or young founder inventor, someone that's been in business for the first time, they will allocate either nothing in that column or a very, very small amount. And when you look at the numbers, it's very, very frequent these days that the cost of acquisition of customer is higher than the manufacturing cost. So if you don't take that into account, it turns out you either don't have a business, or you do have a business that doesn't generate enough profit margin, which means that you have to close down that business after a few years. So you have a good idea, you have a good execution, but you didn't look at the numbers, your business is still down. And that, again, that breaks my heart. And that's really one I'd like to avoid that again.
I think it might be a bit related, but something
That'll be a first, Tony.
Shut up, you. Jackass. That there is something I always say to people when they come to me, because they come to me ready for marketing this new idea or a new product, and unfortunately, they probably haven't even spoken to someone like you, so they're already at that point that they're down the other side of the line. And I'm like, I sort of just sit with them and go, you don't have the money to market this, like, and I'm like, and they're like, well, I've already got it now. Where do I go? I'm like, well, the ones that I see succeed, the only people that have a great idea that actually get it to success, besides not making mistakes, have some sort of unfair advantage. Okay, something that someone else with the same idea couldn't do. It can either be, I got a lot of money, so I can spend a shitload on marketing. I know everyone in the industry, so I can call up my data. I can build it. If it's software, I can build it because I'm a developer, so I can build it. Like there's got to be something that, because like we'll get people come to us that want to build some sort of online portal, right? And I'm like, you're not a developer. You don't have any money. You don't know anyone in the industry. You've just got an idea. And that, like, I'm sorry, but like, not only I don't think you should almost pursue it to some degree. You got to go find someone else to help you on this journey.
But is that some sort of collaboration? Yep. Like, I mean, you turn around.
Yes.
I mean, I know, Philippe, you've been talking about this before, where you couldn't find a shop, a manufacturing shop that would actually put a lot of these ideas together, or you start to build these things together out there as, I mean, like, Australia is the bottom in the world for collaboration. Out of the OECD countries, we're the bottom of collaboration, because our collaboration goes, hey, Philippe, you and I collaborate. How much are you going to buy from me? There's no, like, let's do this together. It's, I'll look after me and then we'll do something for you.
I like
it. So if you were going to put these steps into a process, which I know you have, but I mean, what is the people that you would need to deliver that? I mean, your superpower, as far as I'm concerned, is that you're the only person I know that does design, does manufacture, does it all on a cost. You're working through all these pieces in your brain, where usually that's three independent people, and then something gets broken in between of that. What are the other pieces that you need to deliver this a startup solution from end to go?
So the way I go with the project that we have and the clients that I work with, which are pretty much only entrepreneurs or serial entrepreneurs, the whole idea is to bootstrap the company. The whole idea is to start where you are at, and you have the curve of the adopters and the market. You start with the innovators and the early adopters, because those people are able to buy premium price. They buy innovation, they buy the vision of your company. They don't necessarily buy the product per se. I mean, they do. It's like Tesla. You start with a Roadster. The thing costs a fortune. It's not particularly the best car ever. It's But what do you buy when you buy the first Tesla Roadster 12 years ago? You buy into the vision of the company. That's what you do. And for that, you get a car, and that's the whole idea. So that's why market fit is like super important, because you need to understand who is in your audience. Once you understand your audience, you need to cut that audience into segments and look at who are the innovators and the early adopters, and do you have enough of those? And I would argue that in today's world that is completely flat, I would say pretty much for everything the answer would be yes. But do you have enough of those to start a venture? So that would be my advice, is to start with people that would buy into what you do and not so much about the product. And then you move from the early adopters to the early masses.
So, Philippe, we're nearly out of time. I do want to ask you then, you mentioned several times serial entrepreneurs. Why that particular audience? So why is it a product market fit for you?
It's been the evolution of a number of years into the business, but the whole idea is that when you talk to a first-time entrepreneur about market fit, they haven't experienced building a business and being in trenches. They haven't made the mistakes. They don't really understand what you're talking about. Like, they may conceptually, intellectually understand, but in practice, they haven't suffered the scars in a battle. Serial entrepreneur, it's a very different conversation. Very often, I'll tell you what's happening. When they ask me to describe my methodology, I talk about the 3 legs. And when I talk about market fit, I can't even finish my sentence very often. I will have an answer from the serial entrepreneur that would tell me something along the lines of, oh gosh, yes, we missed that years ago. We developed a software. We thought we were the kings and everything. We put 1 year, $1.5 million on the development and everything. And then crickets. Nobody was interested. And that's the price you pay for experience and everything. And it's so much easier to explain and why in hardware, in product development, you need to stop there and have a mock-up or rendering or prototype and ask the market what they think about it. They're so happy to pay for it because they know that $20,000 here is going to save 200 or 2 million later down the track.
So your product market fit is people that have failed before to do a product market fit.
Yeah, it's just people that have been in business and that have this experience. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Well, we're just out of time. Philippe, thank you so much, first of all, for last week's show and tell us all about your chocolate mousses. And today, just going into this, the idea around how you can avoid some of those costly mistakes. Also, for anybody who's interested, we are running a masterclass with our community and our network on Mighty Networks in association with Jenny Junkier, Masterclass with Intent. Philippe is going to show, not tell. So these have been kind of ideas and just kind of bouncing around. And in theory, on this masterclass, you're going to give us some practical demonstrations of how you can do that. So we'll put the link up for that somewhere attached to this. So Philippe, thank you so much for coming on Corporate Underground and sharing all that information about yourself.
Thank you for having me here today. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, man. Cheers.
Thanks, Philippe. Cheers, mate.